So, buenas and half a day. This is Ginger Cruz. I am the Democratic nominee for the congressional delegate seat for Guam. And I am very pleased to have everybody here today. I'd like to especially welcome the media, Dave from the Post and Nick from KUAM and Troy from Candid, and to everybody out there who's joining online. Today is the launch of our Platform 3.0. We started out with a platform at the very beginning of our campaign that we put on our website, gingercruz.com. And then around the time of the primary election, we launched Platform 2.0, which incorporated a lot of what we had heard along the campaign trail. We listened to questions, we talked to experts, we talked to government agencies, folks that were in charge of all of these critical areas to learn more about the current state of affairs and have incorporated that in. So Platform 3.0 is our latest version. And the first thing that's really important is it's an iterative platform because nothing in Guam is static. Every single day there's new things that happen. So you really can't have a platform anymore that is not out of date in a very short period of time. So this platform is really an effort at transparency and accountability to the people of Guam. It includes all of the views that we have gathered so far, our analysis, our discussion of potential solutions, and it lays out a plan that if I am elected to Congress, I would then look at as the basis for implementation. Now, if I am elected to Congress, a big part of my time in Congress will be taking this platform and then reaching out to the people of Guam in a more official way, having town halls, having organizations of public and private sector to formally have a process where they can give input so that the plan stays up to date, it continues to track with the issues that are of most importance to the people of Guam. And so that's sort of where we are. But Platform 3.0, we're very excited to release it. This is going to be our big release before the general election, which is coming up in 2 weeks. So I'm going to start out giving some high-level pieces, and then I'm going to contrast a little bit with my opponent, and then we'll open it up for questions for the media and for anybody that's online to answer anything that you might have. So let me start out with the basic platform. Some of it will look familiar for those who've seen Platform 2.0. I will just sort of go sequentially through it. It's 16 pages long if we printed it out. There was one piece in there that I have added, which is called Data-Driven Equity. And this is a key element, I think, of a lot of what we are trying to do in Washington, D.C. And that is ensure that when Guam wants to get our issues through, if we need more federal support for housing, if we need more federal support for health care, a lot of those decisions are made better when we have data to support our claim. It's one thing to go to Washington and say, it's not fair, we don't get SSI, or it's not fair, we're not getting reimbursed for the impact of the Compacts of Free Association. But that doesn't necessarily hold water when you're in a Congress that has folks that are fighting for limited resources. So we need to have the facts behind us. We need the proof. And I'll tell you, from 20 years of reading GAO reports about Guam, the GAO constantly says we don't have the right data or enough data. So that's something that really is at the top of my agenda because I believe that will drive a lot of different areas. I'll give you one small example. So the census is taken every 10 years. The last time that the census was taken, 2020, it was kind of an odd year because we were in the middle of COVID. The states have a survey that they send out that updates that information every year. So they have more current data that they're able to use when they come in for grants or they do different things. Guam doesn't have that. We get that once every 10 years look, and then it's sort of, they use a formula to sort of extrapolate what it is. That could be very unfair because then we don't have an accurate accounting of what our demographics, what our poverty levels are. So that's something to think about. The other important thing to think about is that Guam is uniquely tied to the military buildup and expansion. We all know this, right? We are talking about potentially 40,000 people coming to our island in the next couple of years, either active duty military and their families or civilians or contractors who support them. So when that survey was taken in 2020, there were already contractors from the Department of Defense who are paid very, very well, who were living in the community, who were renting homes, who make really good salaries. So when they did that snapshot of Guam to determine what the poverty level was, that poverty level is skewed by the amount of people that are here from the military that perhaps could have inflated that number or made that number go up. And so these are the kinds of things that we need to look at, and we need to do a much better job in getting accurate data that can validate something that every person on Guam doesn't need data to know. And the thing that we don't need data to know is that our cost of living is outrageous. It is easily 60 to 70% more than back on the mainland. That groceries cost too much, that food costs too much, that our hospital and our school need more resources. We know this. We don't need the data to know this. But if we're going to make our case to the Congress, we need to have the data. So that's something that we want to do. The second area that I put a little bit more detail into is my PACE methodology, which is sort of how we're going to be running the office, right? So I talk about professionalizing, amending, collaborating, and exempting. I wanted to focus on professionalizing because this is really important. This is an area of contrast with the current congressman who is in Washington, D.C. So if you look at just about every single member of Congress, in every office, one of the most important positions is the legislative director or the policy director. And that traditionally is somebody who has extensive amounts of experience, 8 to 10 years of experience, crafting legislation, understanding how the Hill works, working with the different committees, right? If you look at all the other territories, they have legislative directors or policy directors with a lot of experience. And they bring to the table, to the Guam team, that experience that the Guam team needs to navigate Washington successfully. If you look at my opponent's office, he has a staff that is largely made up of interns who are, God bless the interns. Those are great, hardworking young men and women who are still in college. But the reason that people intern in an office is so that they can learn from someone who is experienced. And that is the reason that they intern at those offices, right? And then if you look at the levels beyond that, he's got a few legislative assistants with a few years of experience, mostly in the territories. But there is no legislative director, no policy director. And so really having that in my office, and I'm already working with members of Congress who have helped me out. They've linked me in with Armed Services and Foreign Affairs. They're sending resumes of people that have extensive amounts of experience. And we're going to look at that, because bringing in somebody who has that knowledge and then putting the Guam team that has all the experience with Guam policy around them, and of course including the interns, but having a staff that really is ready to go on day one. That is something that is very important to me, and something that I am committing to the people of Guam that we will do. If you look at you look at Congresswoman Berdalio, you look at Congressman Underwood, he had somebody who was from Senator Akaka's office with nearly 10 years of experience. And it really is that experience that helps the Guam office to succeed. And if there are a lack of results, some of that has to do with the fact that you need to bring that experience onto the Guam team. The next area that I will bring up is I added in hardening the power. So hardening the power is something that is not only critical for the people of Guam, it is critical for our economic future, and it's critical to the military. We are the tip of the spear. We talk about that. And we all know from Typhoon Mawar that having the power go down at the naval base and at the Air Force base is not something that is good for national security by any stretch of the imagination. But we really want to be able to dual use here. So one of the things I'm going to push very, very hard for, and I believe it is absolutely within the realm of possibility, to push for the $7 billion that the Guam Power Authority wants to be able to put the power underground, and then use the dual use concept where all of the bases, you've got bases up in the north of the island, you've got bases about 2/3 of the way down to the south of the island. If the military pitches in on their portions that are going to support them and helps to come up with funding that puts that underground, and then we find FEMA funding and other federal sources, we really can harden the power. But here's the important reason for us. If we don't harden our power, how are we going to diversify our economy with broadband? We got $150 million from the federal government to expand broadband. There's huge companies that want to put data centers. That is good paying jobs for our people. But tell me what data center is going to want to set up on Guam if they don't have reliable power, and if a typhoon hits, they're going to be offline for a month, or they have to have so many generators that they have to rely on alternate sources. So these are things that I wanted to make sure I pointed out. In housing, I go into quite a bit of detail because really this is a difficult issue that I know is going to be key for the US Congress in the 25-26 session, the 119th Congress. And housing is an area that is not only a challenge in the States, but it's a huge problem here on Guam. I lay out some of the key things that we are going to look at, but the first one is working closely with the Department of Defense to change the way that they provide reimbursements to moderate some of the costs that are being driven up because they give such huge housing allowances that it's driving a lot of our local citizens out of the market. So we need to look at that, and we need to negotiate something that makes sense so that people on Guam can afford to rent a house if they want to rent. But at the same time, we also want to be able to make housing affordable because houses are the basis of a family. Being able to start a family and to have a life and to really have that peace of mind. It's a sanctuary. It really is the basis of your career and of your life. And so for contractors that come that displace a lot of the available housing, we can start to maybe discuss ways that we can have those contractors have a deposit, an offset. If they're not able to come up with their own type of housing and they're going to be pushing out local community members, then maybe there is a financial amount that they would then have to put into a fund, such as the Guam Housing Corporation or GURA, and that money could be used to help local families with down payments. Just one of the ideas that we have. Of course, these need to be discussed in detail with the housing experts on Guam, with the federal government. I worked at the Housing and Urban Development Department back in the day in 2000, and there were a lot of great policy ideas that need to be looked at. We need to find better ways to get Guam connected to those policies and make them work for the people of Guam. The next thing that's new in the platform is tourism. Now, this is something that we have been working on Guam for a long, long time, but people talk about the three legs of the stool of Guam's economy. And the three legs are tourism, military spending, and federal spending. And frankly, I consider that a two-legged stool, which is why I think Guam is having to struggle sometimes, because two of them are really federal spending. Military spending and federal spending are kind of the same thing. It's all coming from Uncle Sam. So the only other leg we have on our stool is tourism. Now, we need to diversify. We've talked a lot about diversification, but if we don't strengthen that one most important industry for our island, then we're not doing ourselves justice. In the 117th Congress, a lot of work was done because the federal government realized that tourism was something that was contributing 3% to the gross domestic product of the United States. And so they've put forward all of these new programs to expand support for areas of the United States that are promoting tourism. We need to get Guam included specifically into those plans that are going to be coming out. There are 10-year plans that are coming out. There's going to be grants available, and we need to make sure that our number one industry is taken care of, because all of those jobs out there are the ones that we need to protect. We need to find new avenues to bring tourism to Guam, and that's in the platform. I give more information on addressing high airfares. I know I was asked the question, and the answer is not essential air service, because the point of essential air service, which is a federal regulation, is to provide very specific federal subsidies to remote areas of rural United States, such as a small area in Alaska way up in the north, or small areas that don't have a lot of access from airplanes. And that's not Guam. Guam's, we just talked about tourism. We have 747s, we are a major hub for tourism. So we do not actually qualify in any sense for essential air service. So that is not going to be a germane issue. That's the way that Congress puts it. We need to find creative ways. And I think the way that we need to look at it is the Open Skies Act. It is bringing in more competition, treating Guam more as a hub and spoke, finding ways that we can incentivize organizations like Air Nauru, which has started to look at ways that they can expand the hub and spoke and bring more air transportation in and out of Guam. And then, of course, there's negotiating with the existing airlines and talking about what they can do to lower it, because frankly, the existing airlines are getting a lot of their revenue from the federal government. They are making hundreds of millions of dollars off of moving military members, contractors, and families. And so because the federal government, in a sense, already subsidizes the airlines that are working on Guam, I'm sure there are ways that we can cooperatively work with them to lower those airfare prices, but absolutely top on the agenda. On page 10, we've got a new section, which is support to farmers, because not only do we need to support our farmers and really seriously expand agriculture and aquaculture, it's a question of our security, our food security. When we are looking at this whole question of Guam being the tip of the spear, and we talk about being prepared, and we talk about the dangers that we are facing from all of the geopolitical pressures with China, with Russia, with North Korea, when we plan for the future, we have to be prepared for doing things on our own for a certain period of time before we are able to get help from outside. If, God forbid, anything were to happen to us on Guam, we need to be able to sustain ourselves until we are able to get help. And right now, we do not have the ability to grow enough of our own food and to have backup water supplies. And so we need to expand, under national security reasons, our ability to produce more of our food locally. And that means agriculture, aquaculture. How can we give support to local farmers? Because the costs are very high for them. It's a very difficult industry for people to be involved in, because the fertilizer costs a lot, the water costs a lot, the land costs a lot, and then they're hit by typhoons. And so the insurance also takes a hit on our farmers. But we have to find ways that the federal government can support agriculture and aquaculture and the fishermen on our island, because that's a matter of our food security. And so I really do believe that that is going to be something we can look at. Under critical issues, I put a lot more detail on veterans. I think people have heard me speak in many different forums about veterans. We definitely want to put in place an aggressive whole of Guam effort, together with the VFW, with the veterans, with the Guam government, with the federal government, with all of the different organizations, a push to fight for the establishment of a regional healthcare center and a regional benefits center for the veterans on Guam. We have one regional center for the veterans in every single state of the United States, and in one territory, and in the Philippines. So the fact that there is not one in Guam is geographical discrimination. We need to make that argument, just like we did with the North American Numbering Plan back in 1990, when Guam actually got relief from high long distance rates. We can use that same argument once again and get that same benefit for the people of Guam. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but we have to set that down as a goal, and we have to pursue it. Few things I added under environment, waste management. I think this is important. There is the zero waste program that we have on Guam. There are a lot of federal avenues to support that, and that's something we have to look at. When we're talking about an increased number of people coming to our island, the waste program is only going to get worse, and we do not need to have Superfund sites and solid waste that is leaching down into our water system. We've got to make sure that that is well managed and that we find ways to get waste off of our island or reduce that waste. So support for the Zero Waste Management Initiative from the federal government is a key piece. Healthcare, another area where I talked about the need to really get the federal reimbursement rates up. Right now, our Medicaid and Medicare reimbursement rates are stuck in 2014. And everybody out there knows, in the last 10 years, prices have gone way up. And so we've got to work with GMH from the congressional side and do two things. One, rebase those rates, get it up to 2024. And number two, work really hard to eliminate the cap on Medicaid. None of the states have a cap on Medicaid. And it's true, the percentage on our reimbursement on Medicaid has gone up. It's now 83%, which is amazing. And it's a lot better than it used to be, which was 55%. But it's not enough, because if we remove the cap on Medicaid, then we will have more of an ability to use those Medicaid funds to address things like homelessness or support for people that are below the poverty line. So we do need to look at that. One of the most substantial changes to the platform is the inclusion of childcare and elderly care. And I really wanted to put that in, not only because it is a growing and emerging national issue, But because I was really struck when Kamala Harris talked about us being the sandwich generation. And people go, well, what's the sandwich generation? And the sandwich generation is the generation right now that I'm a part of, where you're caught in between kids and grandkids who need help if they're sick and they need to stay home from school. Somebody's got to stay home and take care of them. And our aging parents and grandparents. And I have run across so many people in Guam standing in line at a funeral or at a business meeting who've said, you know, I'm gonna have to quit my job because I need to stay home and take care of my parents. Or somebody in my family needs to make sure they stay home and take care of the kids or the grandkids. And you know, 30 years ago, when prices weren't quite as high and people were able to make a living, it seemed a little bit easier. The families on Guam really did take care of that. But in today's world, with the costs that we're seeing, working families are having a really hard time. And you could see that because during COVID, when all of the federal money came in to support childcare, we went from 39 childcare facilities on Guam to almost 70 childcare. So the demand is there. And that's support for women so that they could be able to have a job knowing that their kids were taken care of. That is something that we need to get more federal support for. For our elderly, there are almost no programs right now that we have from the federal government to help with at-home care or to help with increasing the amount of daycare for elders or even intergenerational care, which is something that I know they want to try to do on Guam. We might even be able to try and do a pilot program to really see how we can find daycare opportunities for children and our Manumco in a supervised arena so that we can improve their quality of life and have people feel comforted that they can go and work during the day and then make sure that their parents or grandparents are home with them at night, but they're also taken care of without that hit to the family. So these are key issues. I talk about compact impact, the fact that we lost $300 million in compact impact. Our current congressman was not able to get that done. And one of the things that we need to look at is how do we get the proper financial support from the federal government for what we all know is an impact of migration from the freely associated states. And we need to get that money not just because the Department of Education is struggling and needs that money, not just because our police and our prisons need that money, but also because we also want to take care of our brothers and sisters from the freely associated states. This is good for everybody, but we've got to make sure that we have the data, which goes back to my first point, the data to be able to make that argument and then pursue that by working not just with the Congress, but also working with the White House and the Office of Management and Budget to see how we can find ways to start to get those costs covered so the people of Guam are not at a disadvantage and so that the people from the federated states are also taken care of with that support. Empowering small businesses, I talk about federal contracting access. I talk about trying to find ways to expand the use of hub zones, which would give a leg up to Guam companies. It is a special classification of contract, hub zone contracts, and anybody that runs a company on Guam can qualify for that if they go through a simpler certification process. It's easier to do than 8A and it's less costly and you can do it faster. And if they do get that hub zone status, and we've got about 100 companies on Guam that have that, they're going to be able to go after more contracts on a special classification. So they get a much higher chance of winning the contracts, and the caps on it are much higher. They can do much larger contracts. So as we're seeing all this huge military buildup, the ability to use hub zone means that a Guam company can go after things all the way up to $400 million, which is great because that will really be an opportunity. But another thing we need to look at is how do we help them with bonding? As I've talked to contractors on Guam, one of the areas that they're having a difficult time with is bonding. And so we want to be able to work with the Guam Economic Development Authority, see how the federal government might be able to come up with ways that we can ease that burden of bonding so our companies on Guam can compete for the work and be part of the military buildup. The final issue is the Grant Center of Excellence. We've expanded that in this platform. We are talking now about the Grant and Proposal Center of Excellence because, one of the things that we talk about is education and what can we do from the federal perspective to help education. And if you listen to a lot of the challenges that we have in our schools, you'll constantly hear the challenges in procurement, the delays for being able to repair schools, the delays for being able to construct something in our schools. And a lot of times the words that we hear are, there was a procurement issue. So if we can find ways to get the federal government to assist, to get resources out to Guam that can help Guam to take a serious look at our procurement system and that can provide training and support and regulatory assistance to improve the procurement process on Guam, that is something that I think if we work very closely with the local government, we would love to be able to provide that federal help to be able to do that. So that is a look at the platform. Now I just wanted to take a few seconds and I wanted to just contrast with my opponent. So let me just say that I believe a platform and a plan are the best way to be transparent and accountable to the people of Guam. I am not a person who is going to go to Washington, D.C. and say, oh, just trust me, I'm going to do a good job, and then not tell you what I am doing, because representing the people of Guam comes with a responsibility to let you know what your representative is doing, to give you an opportunity to contribute to that, not privately, but so that everybody understands what the goals and what the reasons are for us fighting for certain points in that plan. If you go to my opponent and you look him up on the internet and you search for his website for his campaign, there isn't one. There's one for his senatorial campaign, but there's none for his congressional campaign. If you go to his official page, his House of Representatives page, and you click on the issues button and you say, I want to learn more about the economy. You click on the economy, you get a big photograph, and at the bottom it says, if you want to learn more about economy, call my office. And there's a phone number. Okay, so you click on the button that says veterans issues. There's a big photograph, and at the bottom it says, if you want more information, call my office. I don't believe that that is accountable or transparent or responsible. I believe after 2 years, you should have at least the basis of a plan that the people of Guam can see so that you can judge it. I am absolutely open to putting my platform and my plans up against my opponent, and then people can see what is the difference between lack of a plan and the plan that I have. Now, I'm not saying everybody agrees with my plan, and that's why it's up there. And there is a button right underneath it that says, if you disagree, if you think I don't understand something properly, if you have an idea to contribute, we listen. And we put that there for the people of Guam to do. So I just think that it's really important that this position, which is so critically important for the people of Guam, because this is where all the federal decisions are made, which controls so much of our lives. The fact that our cost of living is out of control, the fact that 2/3 of our economic work right now is funded by the military or the federal government means that what we do in Washington is so critical and affects every single aspect of our lives. And so the people of Guam deserve transparency, they deserve accountability. That is what I am hoping to provide. And I welcome everybody to ask questions now, ask questions later, contribute online, DM me, any way you want to, but we want to hear from everybody. So I'll stop there, 12:30, I stuck to my half hour. And I would like to open it up at first to the media and thank them very much for being here.
Thank you, Candidate Cruz. And so I did speak with your opponent, Congressman Moylan, this morning to ask that very question, knowing you would be releasing your platform 3.0. And when I did ask what his response would be, or his platform, he said that it's me. People know me as a senator. People know me as a congressman. They know what I'm about and how to reach me. And so how would you respond to that?
I mean, people can compare that. So you've got 16 pages of what we are going to do, and people know me as well. I mean, I was with my classmates last night from St. Anthony. We were all sort of laughing about that. They're like, I don't know, a lot of people know you. And for the people that don't know me, I absolutely am available all the time to talk to folks. But, I've grown up my life in Guam, and all of the time that I've been here, I think you'll see from the 16 pages of the platform, which by the way was really me. I mean, I wrote that platform myself. That was not a team of people that wrote it for me. That was not me drafting somebody to write it up and me being the political figurehead and putting it out there. That was me. And I asked the people to judge me, read that, and see, do I really truly understand the problems that Guam has, and do I really have concepts and concrete plans for how we might solve those problems? And all I say to the people of Guam is just judge me on that, because I believe that people do know me. I was in their living rooms for so many years, and during that time working at KUAM, they told me their problems. I've known the problems. When I worked for the Gutierrez-Bordallo administration, we worked on so many different aspects of problems. When I was supporting the current administration during their campaign, we worked on so many issues. So I know the issues very, very well. And I just hope the people judge me on what we've presented, and I will leave it to the people and the voters to decide.
You said when it comes to procurement, a lot of the responses typically is it's a procurement problem.
Yes.
But that's where the book stops. We don't go any further than that. How will you ensure that there's more transparency beyond that response?
So the procurement issue is one that really has challenged Guam for a long time, right? And it's not new. There is an organization in Boston called the Procurement Center of Excellence, I think it is, and they actually have gone around the country to over 150 different cities and towns, and they embed experts with the local government, and they sit there, they go through the laws, they go through the regulations, they figure out what kind of training might be needed, where the gaps are, what is stopping things. And these are people who have expertise because they've done this hundreds of times. And I've spoken with them and had some great conversations with the director and the deputy at that office. And they've said, if you can get some federal funds to be able to send us out to Guam, we can send people out to embed with the procurement folks in Guam, working with, the hospital and the Department of Education and the governor's office and administration, and help them and provide their expertise to figure out how Guam can fix and simplify and improve the procurement process. And that is something that, we forget sometimes in Guam, that we're part of the federal government. So we need to reach out to the federal government when we need that help and go, hey, send some expertise down here, help us do it better, because the people of Guam deserve that.
If you were elected, Congresswoman, what kind of support would you be able to give Governor Lulian Guerrero, who yesterday, when she announced a new hospital location and discussed ways of financing the development, said that she wants to pursue as many federal and nonprofit grants as possible for the actual construction and development? How can you help her with that goal?
So we have a grant center of excellence, which I've now turned into the Grant Procurement Center of Excellence. We believe that that is one way to help, because in all of the different agencies in GovGuam, there are varying degrees of expertise. Some have some amazing grant writers. Some of them are maybe they lost the person, they retired, and so they're looking for somebody. One of the things that we can sort of help with is to create this body of knowledge which would strengthen Guam's ability to go after these grants. Because if you look at models in the States, there are organizations that go after grants, and what they do is after they do this for 5 or 10 years, and they do it for lots of different organizations, they start to understand and crack the code. What makes a successful grant? What are the right words to use? How do we put the right information in there? And once you start to crack the code, there's organizations in the States that have like an 85% win rate. So what I'm seeing is if we were able to get a federal resource in here to help to bring together the research center up at UOG, which does an amazing job, the state clearinghouse experts from the governor's office, and really build this knowledge center that gives us a better capability to write the perfect words to go after grants that are federal grants, nonprofit grants, organization grants, that will be able, there's millions of dollars being left on the table. Millions of dollars being left on the table. I talked to Holly Rustick. She's a grant expert. She works on Guam, and she agreed with me. And so if we can really become more of a whole of Guam approach and pull together all of our resources and then be able to aggressively go after those grants, I think that's one way. The second way is if the governor needs that support, we have to make sure that the federal government is putting in the money that it needs. So again, that goes back to rebasing those TEFRA rates. If we're able to increase the reimbursement rates on Medicare and Medicaid, then that would contribute to the hospital being able to go after a larger loan because it would be able to pay it back with that extra money.
Like a revenue bond.
Exactly. So I mean, there's a bunch of different ways, and I, if I'm elected, would very much look forward to working hand in hand, because really it's about having the federal government add to, not just money. We need the money, absolutely, and we're going to go after every single grant that we can. But what are the other ways in which the federal government can support Guam, because we absolutely have to build that hospital. And I'm going to work on those very much if I do get in.
My second question is, right before coming here, I saw a post from one of your detractors, or one of the proponents of your opponent, and it was it has some racial undertones, and essentially the post is suggesting that you would like to roll back benefits that go to Chuukese people and people from the freely associated states. Do you want anything to comment on there?
So I will say that we've got 2 weeks left until the election. And when you see something that gets rolled out that has some outrageous claim, I would suggest that you go to www.gingercruise.com. There is a tab called Truth. And the reason I put that Truth tab there is because there's a lot of lies that are swirling around the internet, that lie being one of them. CFA is a law. All of those benefits go to the freely associated states, the FAS citizens that are on Guam. You know what doesn't go to the FAS citizens on Guam, and what doesn't go to the residents of Guam? SSI. And do you know what? If my opponent had bothered to really negotiate when they were doing the renegotiation of the Compacts of Free Association, which was just voted on this year, he could have used that opportunity to actually have advocated for not only getting the FAS citizens SSI, but perhaps even getting it for the people of Guam. If I had been in there at the time, one of the things I would have done and said, perfect, this is an opportunity. You're doing this renegotiation of the compact, right? There were 2 provisions in it which were just tailor-made for Guam to connect to it. One of them was a requirement that the Veterans Administration find a way to service the veterans in the freely associated states. Immediately, if you're the representative of Guam, you say, you know what? Here's my opening. We can immediately propose building that Veteran Benefit and Healthcare Center on Guam to serve the freely associated states. It would literally occur to me as I'm sitting there in the committee room, right? Never occurred to this guy. And then the second thing is really this issue of SSI. Now, it would have been creative. You would have had to be creative in how you did it. But if you understand foreign policy, which I've done domestic policy my entire life, right? How do you do government public policy? And this is a very straightforward public policy issue. So on the case of compact impact, right? If that goes away and we're going to include CFA instead, then you say fine, but that CFA has to apply to everybody in Guam, right? That's what he voted on. And in addition to that, where it didn't apply on SSI, you could say, okay, the only thing we need to do to make that SSI apply on Guam is to add the people of Guam. It would have been a fantastic policy move, and it would have been a chance that we'd never had before to try and get SSI for the people of Guam. But no, he didn't think of it. He didn't do it. Instead, he lost $300 million for the people of Guam. And now his trolls are coming after me with these lies saying somehow I would take it away, which is the exact opposite. So if you want to see what I have to say about Compact Impact, it's on my platform, 16 pages, right here. It's on the internet, so they can read it.
Can you comment on Guam's need to win back or otherwise improve its reputation and standing in U.S. Congress?
So I have been endorsed by the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus. That is probably one of the most important caucuses for Guam. That is 80 members of the House and Senate that include all the Asian Pacific Islanders. My opponent is not a member of that. He is the sitting congressman from Guam. And that organization, the political arm of that organization, has endorsed me. And in my discussions with them over the last several months, because I've been leaning on them for a lot of really great information on how we handle these issues for Guam. Specifically, a lot of my platform, I've touched that Asian Pacific American group because they understand these policy issues and are going to help Guam. I talked to them about these issues, and they mentioned to me that it's really unfortunate that the reputation of the Guam office right now is not where it needs to be. There is a very prestigious fellowship that the Asian Pacific organization has, where they have one student who is able to go as a fellow and serve in the Guam office. They do that in all of the offices in Congress for all of the Asian Pacific Islander members of Congress. And so that fellow who fought really hard for that position, a young woman, went to go work at that office. She only lasted a couple of weeks, and she couldn't take the way that the office was run, and she ended up withdrawing. And I don't know the situation. All I know is this is what they told me. But the one thing that I can promise the people of Guam is that when we have a representative in Washington, D.C., we need to have somebody that our island is proud of, who is ethical, who runs an office where everybody feels safe and secure and is learning and growing and contributing, and bring back a reputation where everybody on the Hill knows Guam and wants to support Guam, because that is the only way that we're going to get our issues through. So that's my commitment. Thank you.
I want to circle back to your platform. One of the highlights is empowering small businesses.
Yes.
That's something that I see your opponent constantly out there doing, is meeting with these small businesses. What's the feedback you're getting, or have you been out there speaking with some of these small businesses?
Well, frankly, I haven't seen a single thing in Congress that he's done to support small business. I mean, it's one thing to meet with small business, that's great. There's a lot of meetings going on. There's not a lot of results that are happening. I have very concrete ideas. Being a small business owner myself, I have very concrete ideas about how we need to do hub zone expansion, about how we need to find ways to help them with bonding, about how we can concretely help small businesses get a bigger piece of the military buildup pie, right? And I mean, if you look at my opponent's record, really there have been 2 laws that he was a co-sponsor on during the entire 118th Congress. One of them is a small amendment on a bill about migratory birds, and the second one is a commemorative coin bill. And that's it. No issues about businesses, no issues about cost of living, none of the bills that have really mattered for the people of Guam have made it through, except those 2. And frankly, I just think that people deserve more. I think that there is a way to fight for that. And the thing was, he's in the majority. So his party is in the majority, and he's got an endorsement from Mike Johnson, who's the speaker. But Mike Johnson is the congressman who voted against the PACT Act for veterans, the PACT Act that Mike Nicholas made sure that Guam Agent Orange victims were included in. Mike Johnson voted against it. So when my opponent says, oh, I'm going to get him to vote for the downwinder compensation for Guam, we know that's not true, because you can just open up your phone and fact check it yourself. Mike Johnson has been the one person who stopped the expansion of the downwinder compensation, not only for Guam, but for New Mexico and so many other states, people who are dying of cancer who do not have time. And he stopped it. And so he's never going to let that go through. And so, these are the things you need to judge based on record. It's not about just what I say or just what he says, right? You need to look at the record, and you need to judge on the record. And I think the record is really clear.
With regard to childcare and elderly in your platform, clearly child abuse, elderly abuse, also a big issue on the island. How do you think that these issues that you put into your platform might address that?
So one of the things that really makes families feel better is if you have a certified child care facility where you've got all of the rules and regulations, everybody that's running it has to be certified, you can have that peace of mind when you drop your child off, that they are being well cared for in a facility. Sometimes if you're having to go from babysitter to babysitter, or you're having a difficult time and you're looking to somebody else to be able to watch your kids, it gets more difficult. And really being able to provide a safe environment, a clean environment, an environment where you have the peace of mind that when you go to work, your kids or your grandparents are being cared for in a way that gives you that peace of mind. That in itself is going to hopefully reduce some of those unfortunate situations, because it's going to have a more a more contained environment that you can rest assured is going to be available for both your kids and grandkids and for your parents and grandparents.
Finally, you speak a lot with regard to experience, not just with yourself, but with the team that you plan to bring on, should you be the Congresswoman for the island. But there's also a lot of talks that already about the former comms director for your opponent jumping on board with you. Anything you want to say to that?
So I will say that everybody that is going to work for my office, should I be elected, is going to have to go through a very rigorous process where they're going to submit resumes, and every single person will be selected for positions based on their experience. You know, this is not, I've made a commitment from the very beginning. I said I will not have political hires in my office that are hired just because they campaigned for me or just because they showed up. Every single person will be hired based on their experience, their capability, and their knowledge of Guam or knowledge of the Congress, and their ability to work really, really hard, because we are going to be a very hard-working office. So that is my commitment to the people of Guam, right? I made several commitments. I was going to do a funny ad once upon a time where I'm committing I will never use federal funds to run political ads. I can guarantee you that right now. I find it ironic. My opponent was running political ads using his office funds for the longest time, and he's the one who introduced a bill in the Guam legislature to not do that, so I thought that was pretty hypocritical. I will never use federal funds to put my face on a billboard right before an election and start talking about giving you guys passports. It's never going to happen, okay? Number two, I am not going to have political hires. I am going to have people that are highly qualified for every single position, because that is what the people of Guam deserve, and that is what the taxpayers are paying for. And I will make absolutely sure of that. So those are two commitments. You can hold me to them.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a couple of questions from Ollie,
Great.
and you know, we're having a little bit of issues with the internet,
Okay.
so we're kind of off and on. Hopefully he's listening.
Okay.
But his question is, on the grant proposal and procurement center, he wants to know, what does this look like, including staff? Will this be set up at a district office, and will it be funded by our office or through grants?
So I'm thinking of a slightly larger idea. And again, these are not completely fleshed out because I would need to get to Congress to be able to figure out what's possible and what's not. So the first part is really understanding what kind of funding that we can get for it. And if we can make it an independent office that became self-sustaining, I think that would be ideal. So it wouldn't necessarily be a part of the congressional office. It would be a federal startup that would sort of get an office going, an independent office that would be on Guam. It could be taking one of the existing offices within the government of Guam or within one of the autonomous agencies and providing additional funding and support so it could widen out and provide more support. It could be a standalone office. It could be run as a nonprofit. There's a lot of different ways to structure it. And so I don't want to commit at this point to the form that it would take. I am just going to commit that it is a very important issue. And so I would need to get in there and have substantive discussions to figure out what federal resources make the most sense, talk to the local government, the governor's office, and some of the autonomous agencies, what makes the most sense that would help them, not to duplicate things, but just sort of bolster where we need help, especially the mayors. See how we can make sure that we help the mayors go after more grants, and that's what we're going to look at doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions online? All right. Very good. Well, 12:51, I know I've kept you all for an hour, so I just want to thank everybody so much for joining us for the launch of Platform 3.0. It is up on our website, www.gingercruise.com. There is a button on our website. Please, I welcome all of you. Click on the button if you have feedback. We love feedback. Send us your thoughts, send us your concerns. We will listen to every single bit of it and incorporate it as we go. And I thank you all, and I hope that you have a good time reading it. And if you have questions, we're always here at headquarters, and we're happy to answer them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ginger.
Thank you.
Thank you.